Here we go. I want to begin and give a description of the size of my prison that I was in. I'm going to read just a little bit from my testimony, Caught Off Guard. In chapter 3 is where I'll read. The title of the chapter is The Day My Life Changed. It was an extremely cold February day. I was glad I was working at home. Brennan asked me to work on bookkeeping for the cannabis business and commercial properties. This task required weeks of uninterrupted time. I would normally be helping Brennan at the marijuana farm. I enjoyed the lighter work assignment. I worked in our home office, which had a street view. It was after lunch when something caught my eye. My gaze at the computer transferred to the window. A dark-colored truck was parked in our half-circle drive. Shortly after, a knock on the front door followed. I came down the front entry stairs, noticing two men. I couldn't quite figure out who they were. My mind raced as I kept my focus on the front door, which was glass and decorative metal. One of the men was dressed in tactical gear. The other man adjusted his jacket. His jacket had an acronym on it. As I neared the front door, I noticed it said OSBI, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. My heart sank and fear engulfed me as I opened the front door. The man in the jacket began talking, but I was no longer present. And then a few paragraphs down, around the fifth hour, there were 7 to 9 members of law enforcement present. Some were in uniform and others in street clothes. As I came in and out of numbness, I heard them laughing and talking. I remember the normalcy of their conversations. They laughed and talked about everyday conversation topics. I knew my conversations would not be normal going forward. So in 2021, that's when my life changed. My husband was a doctor, had a practice for, I think, 25 years, and slowly transitioned into the medical marijuana business when Oklahoma started that. In 2021, February, he was caught selling 50 pounds of marijuana to an illegally to an out-of-state dangerous drug organization. And then shortly after that, we began to receive death threats on our lives. And a few months later, I ended up relocating and moving out, leaving the marriage. And I sought help through Family Medical Services, and that's where I received counseling and discovered that I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I really didn't know what that entailed, and actually, while I was gathering all the information for this video, and I may reference it as I'm talking, but there was a lot more going on than I thought. What I was actually experiencing, I didn't know it until now, but it's chronic interpersonal behavioral trauma under acute threat. And so in clinical psychology, that exact combination is also considered the terminal stage and not fatal like in the medical field, but at a stage where you've reached your limits as a human being. Physically, every area is being attacked. So I wasn't, dealing with relational hurts. I was dealing with existential terror and internal betrayal. So, according to psychiatric science, this is one of the most debilitating psychological conditions a human mind can endure. The odds were stacked against my survival, mathematically and biologically, and it was overwhelming. The odds of walking away from that without a scratch, let alone in 3 months, are virtually zero in the natural world, and that floored me. I was floored at all this. Um, I knew I was going through something horrible, and it was horrible, but just some of the data that I've gathered, it's given me another image of what I've been rescued from. Also, it says a human nervous system under that exact triple threat should have suffered catastrophic system collapse. I was fighting the absolute highest devastating level of trauma a human being can possibly experience. But today I'm here to say that I walked out of that furnace and God made sure that it didn't even smell like smoke. So I want to go ahead and just tell you a little bit about what it did to my body, my soul, and my spirit. So in the body, when you experience this level complex PTSD, which is rooted in horror, terror, and domestic violence, the brain and your body undergo some deep structure changes. Your body suffers what medical science calls allostatic overload, which means it's a physical breaking point of human stress limits. And so it's one of the absolute hardest types of trauma because your brain has nowhere to run to lower its guard and rest. So because I was facing external, you know, terror outside of the home, and then inside of the home there was domestic violence, and so there's nowhere to go. In science, there's a psychological phenomenon known as double bind, and it destroys the human mind faster than anything else. And it's basically you're under acute death threats. The survival instinct that you have is to run, you know, to your partner, to your husband, to your spouse. But when your spouse and there's domestic violence in the home, you have absolutely nowhere on earth to run and to be safe. And so it triggers a state of psychological shock, and some people often never fully wake from it. So for the brain, there's a part called the amygdala. The amygdala is your alarm system. And so when you're going through complex PTSD, trauma, it gets locked in the on position. So your bloodstream is flooded with cortisol, with adrenaline, and then it causes, you know, sudden panic attacks out of nowhere, anxiety, insomnia, nightmares, physical exhaustion, shaking, your heart races. Even some people that leave the environment, their nervous system remains in this state for years to come. The horror stays in their body. And then, as far as the gut goes, your brain diverts all blood flow from non essential organs when this happens. And so your gut suffers. And for me, I suffered with acid, continual acid production, and nausea, a knot, you know, trauma knots, they call them, in your stomach. And then the other thing that your vagus nerve, it controls your body's ability to rest and digest. Well, it shuts down. And so it locks your body into hypervigilance. You can't sleep. Your body gets rigid. You can shake from adrenaline fatigue, tension, chronic neck, shoulder, you know, tension. And you can just imagine being in that state, how much, you know, and what it might do to your body, because your body feels like it's being attacked. And then it's the soul. So the soul is where your thoughts and your emotions dwell. It's your mind, will, and your emotions. And so in a double front war, that means the external death threats and the internal domestic violence, um, it causes total cognitive chaos. And because you don't have anywhere to drop your guard. There's a place in your brain, it kind of files, it's responsible for filing memories. It shrinks under chronic terror. And so, where it would usually file away memories, it leaves those memories loose in your brain, which then causes terrifying and intrusive flashbacks and paranoia. And so, you will find yourself looking over your shoulder, checking for parked cars, the locks, the windows, who can you trust, replaying the horror, reliving the threats, and then also just reliving abuse. And then another part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. It gets disconnected or goes offline. And so this is kind of the logic area of your brain. You go into a fog, the cognitive fog, a short-term memory loss, and then absolute emotional dysregulation. So severe anxiety, you're not able to focus, you have memory lapses, just this constant suffocating dread about just normal things. The traumatic entrapment, your brain is experiencing severe chemical conflict. And so it's trying to run from the, you know, external death threats, and then simultaneously you're trying to survive, you know, domestic violence from somebody that's closest to you. This breaks your ability to make healthy, logical thoughts. And so it does cause intense shame, self doubt, and suspicion, really high suspicion. So the next thing, the spirit. The spirit is your deepest core. It is your connection, your direct connection to God, and your sense of identity. So horror, crime, and domestic violence don't just hurt your feelings. It is actually a direct launch, an assault launched on you and who you are. And so you just become hopeless in severe, you know, complex PTSD. Your spirit, you know, becomes completely numb. You enter this state of existential desolation. You know, your identity, it feels shattered. You no longer who you are. You're experiencing spiritual fracture. And so you feel tarnished, you feel marked, you feel abandoned. False identity says that you're a victim, that you are ruined. Some of the things that I would do is ask, how did I get here? And then, why didn't I see this sooner? That was probably one of the most common questions I asked, because I didn't know that I was in domestic violence. And I asked over and over and over, how did I not know this? So overall, my body, my spirit, my soul, just this attack wreaked havoc on me.